Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Eggerding and this is Unit 4, Video 5. We are going to review properties of exponents that you learned in Algebra 1. And so these are the five properties that you need to remember. The first is zero exponent property, which means if you have anything raised to the zero power, you will give it a value of 1. The multiplication property states that if you are multiplying two quantities, they have the same base, you will add their exponents. The power property states that if I have an exponent raised to another exponent, you multiply those exponents. So m times n. A negative exponent property. If I have something raised to a negative exponent, that's the same thing as having the reciprocal of that value. And then finally, the division property says that when you divide quantities with the same base, you subtract their exponents. And so I'm just going to do a bunch of examples that review these properties for you and let you practice some on your own. So the first one here, 4 to the negative 2, use the negative exponent property. I write that as the reciprocal, 1 over 4 squared, which then can become 1 over 16. Second one here, it has parentheses, so I'm going to use the power property first and multiply these exponents. The x has an exponent of 1, so it's x to the negative 3, y to the negative 6. Then I'm going to use my negative exponent property, and I will write the reciprocal of those, 1 over x to the 3rd, y to the 6th. Number 3, the only thing to deal with here is this negative exponent. The only thing that has the negative exponent is the x. That's the only part that I need to do a reciprocal of. The 5y stays on top, and it's over x to the 4th. Number 4, the division property. Division property says you will subtract exponents. So it becomes 5 minus negative 8. That's 13. So this simplifies to a to the 13th power. Another division property one, first of all with coefficients. With the coefficients here, 25 and 10, I'm going to reduce them by 5. So I get 5 over 2. Subtract my exponents. 7 minus 9 is negative 2. 5 minus 1 is 4. Now I have my negative exponent property on this r to the negative 2. So I'm going to put that on the bottom with the 2. And in the numerator I have the 5 and the z to the 4th. And so those are some of the basic properties. One thing you will notice is anytime I had a negative exponent, say in number 2 or number 5, it was the last thing I dealt with. I applied all of my other properties first, then I'm going to apply that negative exponent property. And that's going to become a little more obvious in the last two examples that we have. So get things a little bit more complicated here. Number 6, there's a lot of stuff going on. You have a 3x to the negative 2 times 4 to the negative 1, x to the negative 5th squared. So order of operations says I need to do this exponent first. 3x to the negative 2 just is going to hang around for a little bit. Multiply the exponents, so it becomes 4 to the negative 2, x to the negative 10. Now this is a multiplication problem. Now the 3 and the 4 I can't just multiply yet, so I'm going to leave it as 3 times 4 to the negative 2. On my x's, I can add those exponents. Negative 2 plus negative 10 is negative 12. There's nothing else I can simplify, so the last thing I'm going to do is deal with those negative exponents. My 3 to the first stays on top. My 4 squared and x to the 12th goes on the bottom. Or if you want to write it real pretty, it's 3 over 16 x to the 12th. And number 7, about as messy as these can get. Again, I have all of these parentheses, so I'm going to deal with the power property first and multiply all these exponents. So I get 3 to the negative 1, x to the negative 2, times 3 to the negative 2, x to the negative 10. On the bottom, same thing. I get 3 to the negative 2, x to the negative 4. Still more things to simplify. On the top, I still have multiplication, and when I multiply, I add my exponents. So 3 to the negative 1 and 3 to the negative 2, add the exponents, becomes 3 to the negative 3, x to the negative 12. Bottom is the same. It's now a division problem, so I'm going to subtract my exponents. Negative 3 minus negative 2 is negative 1. Negative 12 minus negative 4 is negative 8. Last thing I want to deal with are the negative exponents, and so I do a reciprocal, and I get 1 over 3 x to the 8th. Now remember, if I did something on here that it didn't quite make sense to you, make a note of it, go back and find it, make a note of it, make sure you ask that question in class, or go ahead and post it on Schoology, or shoot us an email, and we'll make sure we address your question in class. We're going to expand on these exponent rules coming up, so you want to make sure you can do them pretty well. 1 through 35 odd, samples of everything that we did. Just practice those exponent properties. Thanks.